Welcome to episode 28 of How About Them Huskies. I'm Connor, joined with Matt, Andrew, and Matt, and today we're recapping a big UConn win. They beat Providence on senior night. It was a blowout, 87-69. Really, everyone contributed. It was a full team effort. Jordan Hawkins led the way with 20. You had Sonogo with 16, Caravan with 16, Newton a solid game. Everybody from top to bottom was just great. It was a total domination in the second half. You had $2 beer night at Gamble, so that had the crowd into it. A whiteout, a lot of perks for the fans at the game. It was just a great environment. Last game in the Gamble Pavilion this season, and UConn came away with the victory.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say something that Jordan Hawkins said in the post game presser was that basically the team was just on a revenge tour. And um, we got Marquette back, we got Seton Hall back, we got um Providence back at home, $2 beer night and stand a chance.
I think in a way, these losses that we had early in the season are kind of good for us because, like Matt just said, I mean, we got three of our, what is it, six Big East losses back. I mean, the Xavier one's hurt. That counts for two. But I mean, they were better than us each time. But we got a big one on Saturday, and that's at the Garden against St. John's in a game that we really should have had. But we have our revenge game in that one, and that's not only a revenge game, but it might be titled the Naheem Aline game because he is just a singular point away from 1K. I mean, he had a great game against Providence. He had three threes, didn't miss, a couple of rebounds, and he's been really up and down this whole season. He's had his highs and lows, but to get that 1K points threshold, he was one of the four people honored on senior night. And to get to that 1K points threshold, it's a big accomplishment. So I believe that he'll get that against St. John's. I mean, really, if not, he'll probably get it against somebody like DePaul. But yeah, that St. John's one is just it's really important.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to point out quickly is that we went on that little slump in the middle of the year. That was a big deal for us and everyone. We were 2 seed at the time, and we were looking at a 1 seed in March, and all of a sudden everything was crumbled down. If you remove that 3 game stretch where we lost to Marquette, St. John's, and Seton Hall, right now you're 21-4. That's an entirely different season. People are looking at 21-4 and 21-7 much different, especially with the season that UConn has had. Outside of those 3 losses, I mean, you've only lost to Creighton, you lost to Xavier, and you lost to Providence, which are, I think, all above us right now in the standings, if I'm correct. So, I mean, outside of that little slump we had around Christmas time, this team's been very effective all season. And, I mean, we seem to be back in form, the form that we were at the beginning of the season, with 2 huge wins over 2 of the top 3 teams in the conference. And I'm just excited to see, where this heads towards the end of the season and into the Big East tournament.
Yeah, and with this win over Providence and the one you mentioned over Marquette, they weren't just wins, they were like 15 plus point blowout wins. That's great to see. And also the scheduling, you mentioned it too. We had a tough stretch around Christmas. We also had to play in around like a 8 day span at Xavier, at Providence, and at Marquette, and a home game against Creighton sprinkled in, which we took. So that's a really tough schedule. I don't know. I don't have all the Big East schedules in front of me, but I doubt any team had to play the top four straight. So obviously playing on the road 3 of those games, you're expecting some struggles, even though we were undefeated going into that stretch. But I'm just glad we're getting these games at home on the back end of the season.
It's just nice to say that the toughest part of our schedule is out of the way. Before tournament play, obviously that schedule is very tough. But the slump in our regular season really correlates to the really tough stretch that they had in the schedule there. So those games are out of the way. Now they're getting some of these teams back at home. The games are a little more spaced out. So it's definitely been a noticeable turnaround since things lightened up a little bit.
I mean, watching this team play after those losses, like games like this clearly mean something to them because they played with so much intensity. I mean, I loved watching Caravan because he in the beginning of the season, he was a guy who just really like if he made a shot, it's just back on defense. nothing about it. But I mean, now like he snuck under the hoop, went up for the dunk, and then like flexed to the crowd, made a three, motion to the crowd, like even that, like getting intensity from everybody on the floor. And that was something that I mentioned earlier in this season was that we didn't have the intensity of people like Isaiah Whaley, Tyrese Martin, RJ Cole. But I mean, maybe they heard me because they've been playing with a lot more intensity, and especially Hawkins, especially Hawkins.
Yeah, especially Hawkins, and that leads me into I'll talk about some of the players what they did. Hawkins, he had a little injury scare. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous when he I don't know if it was an ankle or honestly looking at the replay, it didn't look like an ankle, so that could be even worse. But he came back after like a minute or two out, and it wasn't his A game. He had Devin Carter, one of the best perimeter defenders in the country, on him, but still not his A game. He registered 20 points, hit 3 threes, and had 6 rebounds. I mean, we'll take that any day of the week. And then Tristan Newton, it wasn't his best game. He had 12 points and 7 rebounds, 7 assists. The stats were there. He didn't really do too well from the field. He went 3 for 10, 1 or 2 from three. He hit a big three early on though. But it's good to see him back into the swing of things. We'll talk about the St. John's game coming up on Saturday. We'll preview it in a little bit. He did not have a good game against St. John's last time out. So it's good to see he's got that fully out of his system. I don't think he'll have another dud again this season. You have Alex Caravan, who had a very underrated game. He had 16 points and 8 rebounds, and that's when he was guarding Bryce Hopkins, who, if you guys remember, cooked him last time for 27 points. Hopkins just had 16 last night and no rebounds, which is surprising. And another side note here with Caravan, I saw a ESPN 2024 mock draft, and it had Caravan at 41 and Hopkins at 43. And you know Providence fans ate that up on Twitter saying, what does Caravan even do? Well, here's what he does. He scores the same amount of points as your quote-unquote Big East Player of the Year, and he has 8 rebounds to his 0. So statement game from Alex.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up Newton again. If you look at the box score, he hit his magic number for shots, which was 10. I mean, he only hit 3 of them, but it seems like he's just more in the game whenever he's shooting more shots. Because if he doesn't put up 10 shots, and the rebounds and the assists aren't there, points are never there. But I mean, it's like the second he takes his 10th shot, it's like something clicks in his head. All these games in which he takes 10 shots, we play so much better. And I just think he needs to be involved in the game more. We need more of him at the one. And I like the rotation that Hurley has done with him and Diarra, where he hasn't completely excluded Diarra from the lineup. But at the same time, he's making sure that everybody knows who his number 1 point guard is.
This team runs through 2 people. It's Tristan Newton and Andre Jackson. If those 2 are going, then guys like Sonogo, Hawkins, Caravan, they're going to get going. And then teams are going to want to forfeit early because that's what happened in this one. I mean, Jackson will never be a scorer, but the intensity that he had and the passes he was making, like that sequence where the ball went out of bounds, Jackson saved it, got it to Newton, Hopkins tied it up, and then Newton like made a move to try to get it away, and then Jackson fired it all the way across at about 120 miles an hour to Hawkins, who hit a 3. Plays like that are going to win us games. Hustle plays like that where Providence isn't necessarily in the play, they're just sleeping. But if those 2 are on, this entire team's going to be on. But as we've seen in games like the last St. John's, when if they're off, then the entire team's going to be off. So this team really runs through 2 people. And I think that their playing time is really going to pick up in the Big East tournament and in a March Madness because it's showing really that Newton's on, everybody's on. If he's off, everybody's off. So I think that's really one of the most important things to take away from these last couple of games.
Yeah, and Alex Caravan just keeps proving that he can run with the big dogs. He consistently, he's not putting up big games like statement games, but he is putting up just productive stats on a week in, week out basis. He's winning a lot of Big East freshman of the weeks, and he's building himself a case for Big East freshman of the year. And he's just he proved some people wrong, and he just is continuing to do that.
Yeah, and it seems like as the season has gone on, it seems like Caravan has kind of done a bit of reverse Fatigue. He's had a bit of reverse fatigue where, as the season goes on, usually players tend to, fade away a little bit more, not try to be as physical. But as the season has gone on, I feel like Alex Caravan has done way more inside the paint, way more on the offensive glass, way more on the defensive glass. And that's really what we needed because you've seen, as he started to do these things, we've just been more successful. Even in those games that, we were losing on that little cold spell we had, he was heavily involved. And, one of the brighter spots in the team. He's been a bright spot all season, I feel. And, it just took a little bit of maturing and a little bit of growing from him in order to, unlock that full potential.
Yeah, Caravan, if you guys remember the Creighton game against Arthur Kaluma guarding him, or he was guarding Kaluma, whatever you want to look at it. Kaluma 16 rebounds. And just 6 weeks later, Hopkins had 0. That obviously, I don't think the two correlate too much. It's kind of rebounding's kind of a luck stat, kind of not, but it's just crazy to see that difference. And I'll continue down the starting lineup here. Sonogo, he had a kind of a slow start, didn't get too many touches early on, but he was very efficient, 7 for 9 from the field, 16 points. And that pass early on, I don't know if you guys remember, it was a high-low pass to Caravan, and he just slammed it down. That's a pass we don't see him make too often, just the velocity on it and the awareness. It's really cool to see that. And we'll go to the bench now. Donovan Clingan, happy birthday to him. Shout out. He's 19 years old today, which is crazy to say because he's so good and he's so young, and he'll be here for at least another year. We'll see where that takes him. He had a couple of tough misses at the rim. He had like one possession where he couldn't make a layup. He missed a couple. But other than that, if he cleans that up, he had a very efficient game. He had 7 points, 3 rebounds, blocked a shot, just exactly what you need from him. You don't need the 15-point, 10 rebound performance you can get from him. But if you get that, obviously it's a plus. But you'll definitely take 7 points, 3 rebounds in 12 minutes.
Yeah, a guy like Donovan, he just turned 19 today. He's a guy who I've noticed when he misses at the rim, he gets so wide open that he gets too excited because he knows what he's gonna do, which is just slam it and use his long legs to step from, it feels like the 3-point line to the paint. But he gets a little too excited at the rim sometimes because he knows that he's gonna slam it on somebody's head and the place is gonna go nuts. So that's definitely something to work on, not always be in a rush, not just turn and try to slam it, but like maybe try to work on something kind of like a sky hook, not quite a sky hook, but at least like a move where you can spin and get open. But he's young, he's going to develop, but that's just what I picked up from him. But his intensity is something that I love, and he's the definition of a Connecticut Husky.
Yeah, we'll move on now. Aline, Andrew mentioned he's 1 point away from 1,000. He scored 9 points. He's at 999. He didn't miss a 3. And he's really our X factor. I didn't realize this until John Rothstein. So if you don't follow him on Twitter, I suggested he's a great follow for college basketball. Knows his stuff, pretty funny too with his robotic type tweets. He said in games that Naheem Aline scores 8 or more points, UConn is 9-0. So if you get him his looks and he knocks him down, or it's the recipe for success. And he's pivotal for this team. I'm going to call him the X factor. You need, obviously, teams trim the rotation down in March. Usually it's around 7, 8 guys. You need some solid bench production. And I feel like if he's a 6th man we can count on for those 8 points, that's humongous. And I feel like he definitely can do that. He can knock down a couple of threes like we saw. He can score inside occasionally. He's played solid perimeter defense. Obviously, it's probably not the season he envisioned having at UConn when he transferred here, less than 5 points per game, but his role down the stretch is going to be huge.
Yeah, and I feel like that record that we have with him above 8 points, I feel like that makes a bit of sense because Aline, honestly, when he scores, to me it's like bonus points because we're not necessarily looking at him majority of the time. So whenever you can get him good looks and he could get points in, that's big because if you're getting a lot of production from someone that you're not necessarily getting your production from, and when we're losing production from guys that we expect big production from, it really helps. And, if he can just stay consistent, even if he can't get 8, get 6, get 5, get 7, keep your role in the team and just, bring anything off the bench because that first half of the season was pretty rough, but the season gone on, he's become a much better player.
Yeah, and in my opinion, Naheem Aline could really be an important player for us going down the stretch here. Just because I always hang on to the whole thing that he had his career high in March Madness 31, and he's so experienced. And like we were talking about, he really is an X factor for us when we're getting production from him. It makes things a lot easier on other guys. So he really could be important going down the stretch here. And hopefully, if he gets to 1,000 points, it could do something like unlock him and he could give us some solid production. But just one more guy to give us 7, 8, going into Big East play, going into the March Madness. It could be so crucial.
And a combination of what he does and his role for the team is like UConn's Tyler Polley this year. Ty's a pretty good friend of the pod. Aline's pretty much that. Like last year, they played 6 guys pretty much against New Mexico State, and it was just the starters and Polley. And Aline is that guy this year. I'm not saying they'll trim down to 6 again. I'd honestly be shocked. But yeah, end of discussion. Aline is the X factor for this team. We'll move on to the rest of the bench real quick. DR, 10 minutes, didn't do any scoring, but got a couple assists. I'm fine with that. His role is not to score the basketball, it's to be disruptive on defense and give guys like Newton and Jackson a break from handling the ball. Joey, he back in the rotation a little bit. He checked in the first half after a DND against Seton Hall. He scored a 3 like the last bucket of the game. It's good to see him score on his senior night. Even though he'll probably be out of the rotation for Big East tournament and March Madness, he still has a chance to be crucial for this team to come in and hit a 3 like he did at the end. And Richie Springs, of course, checking in on his senior night. Great to see that. I've seen stories that he's great. His role on this team is much more than just being a guy at the end of the bench in practice. He does it all, and I'm glad to see him honored and get in the game. I was hoping it'd be either a big win or not hoping it'd be a big loss, but just hoping a situation where you get to see Richie on the floor, and it was. And we'll talk about Providence real quick. Jared Bynum, he couldn't miss in the first half, 4 for 4 from 3, but he barely played in the second half. I was worried he'd have a game where he'd go for 20 something points. He only finished with what? He only finished with 14, and that's good to see for us. I don't know why he didn't play more often. Bryce Hopkins, I mentioned, he did phenomenal against us last time. He had 16 last night, which led the Friars, but it was kind of a quiet 16. He didn't really worry me too much. I mean, he scored 7 straight points early on, but besides that, he was fairly quiet. And Noah Locke, I don't know if you guys noticed it too, he has a very unique style, similar to Hawkins. He just catches it and just fires it. His legs go out. He's a pest to play. I mean, he didn't do too great in this one. He only made 1 3, but he's had games I've seen when I've watched Providence. He's made 5 or 6, so glad he had an off night. And one more Providence player I want to talk about, making his Gampel Pavilion debut, Corey Floyd, getting the cardio in with those 15 minutes. Did not score. He did get a rebound and an assist, though, so good for Corey.
With Providence, they were out-rebounded by us 40-20, and you're not going to win a game when you get out-rebounded by 20. That's where we'll start with this. I mean, the Providence fans on Twitter blame the refs, and then Isaiah Whaley, a new good friend of the podcast, took to Twitter and brought the stats out. It was 14-12 us, and we led with fouls. I mean, obviously somebody didn't do their research. Whoever tweeted that, I don't remember. But with them, it's that really the fans, I think, were the biggest part of this game. I mean, UConn fed off the fans. I mean, you had that $2 beer night, and Lord knows how that went. You had Big Larry from Twitter sneaking into the student section into the front row. That's great to see always. But it was the key night and the key crowd, the exact crowd that UConn needed to beat a team like Providence, because they wanted to beat you again after they beat us pretty bad at their own place. But it was the crowd, I think, was the MVP in this one. Although we had 2 people with 16 points and 1 with 20, I think the crowd's got to get the MVP for this one.
Yeah, Cardio Corey and Providence really couldn't get anything going. They had 2 starters shoot above 50% or 50%, which was terrible. Bryce Hopkins, outside of scoring, which he shot 4 of 10. He had 16 points. He didn't really do much either. They couldn't really stop us at all. We scored 87 points, which is, really good for this point of the season against a team like Providence putting up 87. You're looking at putting up 87 in the preseason. We just put up 87 in one of our final games against a big conference rival. So, I mean, I'd love to see how we're doing, and I'd love to see us going to St. John's and repeat this performance.
Yeah, as soon as the broadcast ended, they said it was Providence's first double-digit loss since they lost at TCU in late November. That's that's huge for us. I mean, we did it pretty easily. Like you said, 18-point win, handled them in the second half, a little close in the first, but overall, phenomenal team effort. And another interesting stat that I noticed, and a lot of people were talking about, was that there were no free throw attempts in the first half. The refs were just letting him play. UConn had just one foul, and it was a questionable Klingon offensive foul on a screen. So arguably, you could say we had no fouls, and Providence just had four. And I saw someone tweeted it out. I don't have the credit up, but this was the sixth game this season in Division One. There were no free throw attempts in the first half, and he followed that with obviously there were free throw attempts in the second half. But I don't know, it felt like the pace was very very fast in that first half. Obviously there were no free throws, but it's just interesting to see. And then UConn got a tough whistle right out of the break. I mean, Providence was in the bonus within like 6 or 7 minutes. They were in the double bonus with like 10 minutes left.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the refs doing something or if it's the Huskies themselves doing something right or a combination of the both. But I feel like in games that are um good flowing, like very fast paced with a good flow, the Huskies do better where they could kind of play out of control but in control at the same time when they could just get up and down without a lot of whistles. It's the way this team is built and it's the way Dan Hurley probably has his practices going. So when they could just get out and run in transition, it changes a lot of things up for them. And I love games when it's just free flowing and no whistles. It's some of the most fun basketball you could watch.
All right, I got two more little quirky points here about the Providence game, then we'll move on. First, I saw former Husky Doran Sheffer from Israel was in attendance, and I saw he took a picture with Yaren Hassoun, who's also from Israel. So it's cool to see that connection overseas. I'm sure Hassoun has talked a lot with Sheffer, both being from Israel, playing for UConn. That's a little cool thing I saw today. I thought I'd shout that out. And also in the NBA, there's this elusive club. I don't know how elusive it is. I don't know who's in it, if it's that rare, but I know the 50-40-90 club. You want to shoot 50% from the field, 40 from three, and 90 from the free throw line. UConn is a team. They did that last night. They shot 53% from the field, 48% from three, and 93% from the free throw line, which arguably is the most important stat there because they've had their struggles. So it's good to see they're making their shots. They're taking shots, making shots. And when they're missing 15 offensive rebounds, not too many empty possessions for UConn. And I said I had two more things. I forgot I had one more here. We'll talk about this very briefly because I feel like it's honestly nothing. But Ed Cooley had an interesting quote after the game in the press conference. He said, Connecticut has been very fortunate to have some incredible teams and incredible coaches, and this fan base is extremely spoiled. Appreciate winning. Don't get arrogant with it. Appreciate it and try to get the next one. I feel like that was a little uncalled for. It's kind of like sore loser vibes. Like, oh, you won, but you're rubbing it in our face. Don't do that. You're spoiled. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. I feel like it's I don't know. That's all I got. I don't know.
Okay, so I don't want to get too wrapped up in this because I mean it's clearly he was bent out of shape because his team just got the doors blown off of them. And his team, I feel like it really surprised him because his team is good as much as it feels weird to say Providence is a good team. I mean Bynum, Devin Carter, Hopkins, they're all good players. They just really they didn't come to play, and I feel like he didn't really want to admit that because it's tough to admit it. I mean, give credit to the guys who do admit it, but that's something that shouldn't be said. I mean, calling us what do you call us? Don't be arrogant about it. I mean, telling us not to be happy because we just beat our rivals by 18. It's definitely a sore loser type of thing. And don't worry, UConn Twitter ate that one up as quick as he said it, so you don't have to worry there. But I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but although I could not imagine what it would be like if Dan Hurley said that. I mean, I feel like people like if that happened to us, like if we got blown out by 18 when we played at the Amp, I feel like Providence fans would be calling for Dan Hurley to be thrown in jail and banned from college basketball and things like that. But it's definitely a weird thing to say after a game like that. But I'm not gonna get too wrapped up in it.
It's dumb. Tell your players and fans the same thing, Ed. Tell them the same exact thing that you're telling us. And Hurley can't say that because Providence fans have not been spoiled, up until very recently. I mean, how many banners do they have hanging in the amp? I'm not sure. Did they hang up that regular season championship yet?
Oh,
They
yes,
better.
they did.
I was gonna
They've got
say,
their regular season championship and 19 whoever knows NIT title.
oh yeah, the
They
big
got
NIT. There they go. They've been spoiled with NITs. Don't get too cocky yet.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Ed Cooley is a great coach, a great person. That's just a weird thing to say. I don't know. I'll leave it at I don't know. Just move on. Well, we're gonna preview the St. John's game, but real quick, Big East tournament. UConn will be playing 2 weeks from today, most likely. Hopefully, most likely. They'll be playing 2 weeks from today. We have a 92% chance to be the 5 seed and play that 2:30 slot on Thursday afternoon. We have a 6% chance to be the 4 seed, which is unlikely. We'd play the same game, the 4-5 game. And a 2% chance we fall down to the 6 seed and Seton Hall passes us, which means we'd have to play Georgetown Wednesday night. But that's a lot that would have to happen for that to be the case. So we can pretty much rule that out. It's pretty much confirmed we're the 5 seed. We're playing at that 2:30 time slot in the 4-5 game. But our opponent for that one, I have percentages. I saw on Twitter like a whole grid, the odds of getting each seed. And for the 4 seed, there's a 40% chance we get round 3 at Providence, like Cooley mentioned in one of his quotes, how if we get that, his team will be ready. 40% chance for that, 32% chance we get Xavier, and 21% chance it's Creighton. And the winner of that game would get Marquette or Butler/St. John's, whoever wins that 8-9 game. So I want to ask you guys, out of the 3 teams that we could play, who would you rather play first? And remember, for Xavier, who obviously they beat us twice, but Zach Freemantle likely won't be suiting up because of his injury. I'd be surprised if they rushed him back like that. And Creighton and Providence obviously be split with both of them. So it's a really interesting case. I want to hear what you guys have to say.
give me Creighton. And there's a firm reason to that. There won't be anybody in the Garden cheering for Creighton. They play all the way in Omaha, Nebraska. The teams, Georgetown might have fans, God knows with them. UConn will have plenty. Providence will have plenty. St. John's and Villanova will too. But I would much rather play Creighton because I don't think they're very good. Honestly, I really don't think that Creighton is as good as they show. Xavier, they're very good. Xavier's a very well coached team. I just don't think that Creighton is really a very good team, and I think a lot of their wins are because of where they play. I made the point about it being in Omaha, Nebraska, and if you can tell me what activities you can do there besides watch the Creighton Blue Jays, props to you. But there won't be really any fans for that team at the Big East tournament, so I would take them, and especially because Sonogo knows how to play Kalkbrenner. This will be our 3rd time playing them, and yeah, I would take Creighton easily.
I'm going to take Creighton too, mainly because that first game that we played, we beat them. I felt we only won by 9, but it felt like a pretty comfortable game. Sonogo had Kalkbrenner in his pocket the entire time. And then the second time we lost, I mean, they didn't beat us, in all honesty. I felt like we beat ourselves. They couldn't get anything going either. We just couldn't get it going less. We just had a terrible day shooting the ball. But I mean, so did they. And a few other calls were like, I'm not blaming the calls, but things just such as calls or, loose balls we dive on, those things really change those kinds of games. So I feel like, if we come in March, especially at the Garden, I think we come out on top pretty comfortably.
I personally would want to play anyone besides Xavier. I feel like Xavier is a team we really struggled with all year. And it's kind of a toss up for me between Creighton and Providence. And I think after seeing the other night, I'd rather play Providence. I think that we're just on a different level than them right now. And when we lost them earlier this year, we were a completely different team. And I just really like our matchup against Providence right now.
For me, I'm in a weird spot because obviously you can't control who this is. We're saying this for nothing, but I'll probably go with Providence because I really want to see round 3, especially with the rivalry between both the teams and the fans. I feel like that'll be amazing. And like Andrew mentioned, UConn shows out at MSG. Providence does as well. I hope we'd have more fans there than them, but that'll definitely be a sold out game, even though it's a 2:30 on a Thursday. that'll definitely be a sold out game with UConn Providence, and odds as of now, it's the most likely matchup. But I'm not too. It's a weird spot where I feel like we can beat all the teams, but I also feel like we can lose to all the teams. Uh, I don't know though. I'd say Providence probably, with Creighton and Xavier probably tied for next up, but I don't know. I'll go Providence. And we'll move on now to the St. John's game at MSG on Saturday. And like we mentioned, UConn fans show out. It'll be a UConn home game, hopefully. But last game against St. John's, Matt and we were there. It was ugly. Hawkins went for 31, and Caravan 16, Adama 14. The rest of the team just 13 points combined. It was a very lazy, very very lazy defensive effort. It felt like every possession St. John's was just walking down the court, dribbling by us and laying it in. This was like I mentioned, the infamous Newton game, 18 minutes, no points. That'll be improved, I hope. 6 Red Storm players were in double figures, led by Joel Soriano's 19 and 13. And like I said, the lack of defense, and just I feel like we'll see a completely different outcome this time around.
Yeah, before the season, I remember I marked this as my matchup to watch. And I felt like St. John's came out and showed us exactly why they had that little bit of preseason hype that they did have. They came out and they just stomped all over us. I feel like I can account that loss entirely to the fact that they were way more physical than us and we couldn't handle it. We won the rebound battle, but it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like it was a game where we had the boards unlocked. It felt like Joel Soriano was doing whatever he wanted. Adama had 14 and 10, which is it's a good game. It's Adama. That's like a typical game. Soriano had 19 and 13. That was a big problem, especially with Caravan. This was during his stretch. He had a very good offensive game, but on the defensive end, he couldn't seem to get it together. They had 4 players with 12 or more points in the starting lineup. And then on the bench, they had Pinson and Carbello with more than 10. So they were getting buckets and numbers. We couldn't really do much about it. But I don't think this is a performance that repeats itself. I feel like this is a bit of a one-off, especially with how, they shot the 3. They shot 15% from 3, and we still lost. So I feel like we come out. I feel like we make a pretty big statement pretty early. I don't think the game will be very close.
No, this is another revenge game, and UConn's really killed the revenge games. I mean, Marquette and Providence, but I feel like Danny's telling them now that it doesn't matter who they're playing. I mean, they have so much confidence at this point that they could just steamroll even the Celtics, because they've been playing their best basketball really that we've seen probably since the PKI. But this one, MSG is always, I mean, last year they gave us trouble. We only won by 3, and it came really down to the wire. But I feel like this one's going to be different because whatever Hurley said to them in the locker room after that game really must have woke them up, because that was probably the worst game I've seen them play this season. It was really, really bad. But I feel like that definitely won't repeat itself because St. John's really isn't all that good. I mean, we have all better players than them. But I'd love to see if Corbello is going to be rocking those sunglasses again. And if you're going to the game, try to get those for me. I love those. I'd love to keep those in my possession. But I think this is going to be not even close. I think we're going to win this one by 10 plus.
Yeah, and last time we played these guys, it kind of just seemed like they were getting whatever they wanted, and especially inside, I remember how frustrating it was watching Andre Curbelo go inside and score on us, being 6'1", just being the smallest guy on the floor, and he's wearing his Morpheus glasses, which is a cool look. I'll give that to him, but it's just they definitely caught this UConn team sleeping. And that was when UConn was going through a habit of sleeping through games. And recently, it seems like even if they haven't won, and they have been winning a lot more recently, the intensity has just been on a higher level than it was that night. So this will be a really good gauge to see what the intensity of this team is like on a night-to-night basis. But I feel like at this point in the season, we've been playing so good. I'd be super surprised to see us lose this one.
Yeah, to sum it up, St. John's has been a mess this year. They started the year hot in non-conference play. They were, I believe, 10-1 in non-conference, but it's just been falling down very quickly for them. We mentioned Curbelo a few times. He's one of a couple players that's been suspended by the coach this Big East play. Curbelo was suspended for like maybe 3 games. He came back last game, so he'll play most likely. You don't never know with Mike Anderson. He'll most likely play on Saturday. And Rafael Pinzone, who Matt mentioned, came off the bench for double figures. He's been suspended the past couple of games, all for like team protocol stuff. So they're really just a mess out in Queens. UConn should handle this one pretty well. And I'm curious to see I don't remember the defensive matchups from last game, but I'm curious to see if they'll throw Andre Jackson on Posh Alexander, because you've seen the success we've had with Andre on the point guards, like Primo Spears held him scoreless again with Georgetown. Tyler Kolek kept him in check against Marquette. Posh, he's not a real scorer similar to Kolek, but he's a good playmaker and he can score once in a while. But I feel like that'd be the matchup to do. Andre on Posh, and also UConn had 21 turnovers to add on to their sleepiness on defense. I feel like neither of those will happen again. And also, guys like Newton, I mentioned he didn't score. Jackson had a very bad game as well. He had like 2 points in 20 minutes, fouled out. And Aline didn't do anything either. All three of those guys are much improved since that game 6 weeks ago. So I feel like we'll see a very different UConn team, also a very different St. John's team. And I feel like UConn will come out on top. And that leads me into the players to watch real quick. We'll each give one. And I'll go with Newton for the obvious reasons, how he struggled last time. I feel like he'll have a big game. I don't know if it's his first game at the Garden. Definitely his first game for the Garden with UConn. I can see a 20-point, 8-9 assist game from Newton fairly easily.
Yeah, and I'm looking to see what Adamas Sanogo could do. If he could really hold it down in the paint this game. After what happened last game, he kind of didn't really win the big up match, and it's really important to this team when he does win the big up match. So
let's get our 1 point Naheem and let's go home. I'm gonna go with Naheem here, 1,000 points. I feel like he breaks 1,000. I feel like he breaks the heart. I feel like he has a pretty good game.
I'm going to go with Caravan because he's been on a roll as of late. And I think this is a game where teams will probably end up leaving him wide open and then having to pay for it because he's a very good player, very good shooter, been playing with more intensity. That beard looks good still too. So I feel like Caravan's my guy for this one.
All right, and I think that'll just about do it here for episode 28. Recap the big Providence game, looked at the Big East tournament seedings a little bit, and also previewed the big game against St. John's. I'll be at the Garden. I won't be rooting for UConn, though, unfortunately. I'm with media, so I can't be cheering, but I obviously want the Huskies to win. So that'll be fun. And Matt, you have one more thing?
Yeah, I just wanted to plug our SeatGeek code. Haven't done that in a while. I was checking today, which is why I want to do it. I was looking at Big East tournament tickets for the Garden, pretty cheap for session 1. I didn't see any other sessions, but for the first session, you're looking at $5 for a ticket right now without fees. If you're looking at fees, you're looking at about 15. So if you use code HBTH, once we get that over $20, you can get some pretty good seats for pretty cheap. I might end up doing it. I highly recommend you guys do it. So once again, if you use code HBTH, you can get yourself some pretty sweet seats to the Big East tournament.
Yeah, like you mentioned, $5. Obviously, $20 might get you in the lower bowl, and you can use the code. That's pretty much free. UConn, I don't think UConn's playing in that first session. I'm pretty sure the first session is like the 6-11, 8-9, but it's still Big East basketball triple header for pretty much free. I mean, if you're in the city, you have nothing to do Wednesday. I feel like that's a no-brainer. And I feel like that officially caps off episode 28. We'll look for an episode, hopefully, between the St. John's game and the final home game against DePaul. But yeah, thanks for watching.